All right, everyone, welcome to this video. Fall, as they say in the US, or autumn, as they say in England, is upon us. We're officially at the very tail end of October, and it's almost Halloween. And I love fall and Halloween, as indicated by the cozy fall background that I've got running on the TV right now. I also have a pumpkin spice latte in hand, which that sounds really cringe when I say it, and I shouldn't be drinking this because it's caffeinated, and it's pretty late. I need to go to sleep in a couple of hours. And as you can tell, the sun is about to set. I assume that it will actually set by the end of this video. We'll see. But yeah, there's a couple things I love. Okay, well, there's a lot of things I love in life, but amongst those things are fall, because it's cozy. I love being cozy. And I love business and making money. And if you can combine those all together, making money while being cozy during the fall, that's pretty much my definition of peak life. Okay, I love that so much. And so I thought today I'm going to be talking about, well, the coziest ways you can make money in 2026, okay? More specifically, the coziest way that you can make money in 2026. There might be cozier ways, to be honest, but it's a pretty cozy way, in my opinion. And it's also a way that you can make a lot of money because, well, making 3 grand per month being cozy is okay. But if you make 10, 20, 30 grand per month while being cozy, I think it's even greater, right? It'll allow you more freedom. And with that freedom, you can be, well, as cozy as you want. So I thought that I would start this video with a personal life story of mine to give this video context, okay? So let me take you actually more than 10 years back, okay? Way more than 10 years. I was around 11 or 12 years at this time. My mom and I used to have this tradition where we'd go to an amusement park in Copenhagen, which is where I grew up. It's an amusement park. It's really old, one of the oldest in the world, in fact. It's called Tivoli. If you've ever been to Copenhagen, you would have been to Tivoli probably, or at least heard about it. And so every Halloween and every winter for Christmas, Tivoli will like transform the entire amusement park into the theme of the season, right? And so we'd go every Halloween, and so it'll be fully Halloween themed with, you know, what are they called, scarecrows and pumpkins, of course, basically everything that screamed Halloween. It was really cozy, right? And so usually the years prior we would do the different amusements, right? We try the rides in there, but this year I discovered something that hadn't been there the previous years, and they had introduced a new system essentially where, you know, you could buy drinks in Tivoli, right? Like you could buy tea, you could buy a pumpkin spice latte, you could buy whatever you wanted. But all these cups were made of plastic. And then they had their own recycling system inside of Tivoli, which essentially you could take a plastic cup and put it inside of this machine and close the lid of the machine. And then it would suck the cup down somewhere to the underground, and it would spit out 5 Danish krones, which at the time was approximately the equivalent of $1 US, right? And so when I discovered this, I was like, essentially I convinced my mom to not try, like I told her I don't want to try any rides today. I just want to go around and collecting these cups all day and see how much money we can make. And so I think we walked around for 5, 6 or 7 hours the entire day. And by the end, we had collected around 100 cups. So I had made around, well, 500 Danish krones, which would have been around $100 US, which is quite a lot of money for an 11-year-old to make in one day of work. Well, more specifically, like 5, 6 hours of work. It's pretty good hourly wage for an 11-year-old. Now, the point of me saying this is that's a pretty, not just simple, but also cozy way of making money, right? And so that matched perfectly with what I wanted, because back then I was just obsessed with ways of making money. If you've ever seen any of my other videos where I talk about my life, you would know that I also had my own candy store back then. I would always try to find ways of making money. But I think that the reason I never came back to Tivoli to collect more cups and make more money was that although it was cozy and simple, it wasn't scalable. It wasn't a system. And what I was essentially obsessed with was something that, sure, was simple and cozy, if you will, but also scalable. A system that I could sort of build and it would work for me and make me money even when I was sleeping. Now, I might not have thought that deeply about it at the age of 11, but subconsciously, that's what I wanted. And so I think that's why I wasn't considering going back there to make more money every day, because I wanted something that was more replicable, something that was more scalable. Now, it seems that today, unfortunately, wherever you look on the internet, there are people bombarding you with simple ways of making money. And even more unfortunately, I think that most of the time, those models probably are a little bit too good to be true. They might not be working just as well as they're advertised to. I think a few of them are even downright scams, right? Here I'm talking or pointing specifically at, you know, the people that will convince you that you can become rich day trading, essentially starting with no money and just pulling cash out of thin air. And that you can get rich doing that, essentially gambling with the markets without creating any value for anyone. I think that's such an illusion and so manipulative to try and convince people that they can work while just being lazy and day trading, essentially gambling without creating value for anybody. That's the wrong mindset to have when it comes to making money. And frankly, I think it's sad that so many people believe in it. But regardless, sometimes opportunities are advertised that aren't too good to be true. Some businesses have to work, right? That's just, it has to be a fact, because if no businesses worked, if all business opportunities were too good to be true, well then nobody would be rich, right? Nobody would be successful. Fortunately, that's not the case. You and I can probably both think of hundreds, if not thousands of people that are successful, that are millionaires, that are running a successful business, right? And so just based off that fact alone, we must assume that, well, some business models are not too good to be true. Some business models are actually viable. Some business models actually work. Now, in most cases, these business models probably won't make you a billionaire. Sometimes they do. You might be the next Jeff Bezos, but in most cases, whatever simple system we have for making money might be viable, but won't make us a billionaire, but that's good enough, isn't it? If what we want is to make 10, 20, or 30 grand a month while being free and being able to be as cozy as we want. Like, this is peak living for me right here. I'm sat in a high rise. I'm living at Four Seasons, right? The Four Seasons private residences. I'm sat on the 27th floor, okay? I got my cozy autumn background in the background, and I'm sat here working. This is peak living for me right here, and you can do this without being a billionaire, essentially, right? You can do this if you find an online business model that works, that has a simple system, that is replicable, that works for you and makes you money even when you sleep. This is all I ask for. This is what I want. So let's dive into it. I think that if you look at online business, YouTube right now, the space in general, you'll find that most people are making, well, most of their money, if not all of their money, by selling high-ticket coaching programs that are either just coaching-based or that are sort of done-with-you programs. But, you know, programs that usually start at 5K but range all the way up to 15, 20, 25K. High-ticket coaching programs. I'm sure you've heard of them. And that's fine. It seems to be working quite well for a lot of people. I have a lot of friends that are making multi-six figures a month selling high-ticket business coaching programs. But I also remember a long time ago, one of the first business books I ever read was called Zigzag. It essentially stated that when everybody zigs, you should sag. And what that means is when everybody does one thing, you should be doing another thing. Okay, so personally, I don't want to be selling high-ticket coaching right now because that seems to be what everybody is doing. And furthermore, if you're looking at the space and feeling lost and thinking to yourself, I don't want to be selling high-ticket coaching programs, but that seems to be what everybody is doing, and it seems that there's no other opportunity or viable way of making even just 20, 30, 40, 50K a month, well then I think you need to remove yourself a little bit from the bubble. It's so easy to get sort of encapsulated into a bubble and not look past it and just think, this is the only way to make money right now, right? What we need to understand, especially when it comes to the creator economy and online education, which seems to be how most people are making their money online, also how I've made most of my money online throughout my career. I think it's the greatest opportunity, right? It's online education. But there's many ways of doing online education, and it doesn't have to be in business, right? I've made most of my money selling courses that have been sort of direct to checkout as opposed to having sales calls and selling really expensive programs. But sure, my teachings have always been around business. But what we need to understand is there are literally multi-seven-figure courses, multi-million-dollar courses that are being created on things like jazz, right? So music, tennis, right? So sports, could even be soccer. It could be creative fields such as arts or interior design. It could be pickleball, okay? It could be fishing. There are million-dollar courses being created on so many topics, basically every topic imaginable. So it doesn't have to be around business. And what you have to understand is that in all of these fields, on all of these topics, there are experts that are dying to create an online course, right? They have maybe decades of experience and they love teaching people, but they have no idea how to turn it into an online course. They don't know how to, well, host it, right? Manage it. So record and upload the online course, host a community and manage a community, build a highly converting sales funnel, and set up all the backend, right? So email marketing, all that stuff, even run paid ads. These people, they don't know how to do that, but they have really valuable information that people would pay hundreds or thousands of dollars to learn. Even if they just charged $49 for it, there's thousands of people that would buy it. And so quite quickly, teaching a course on anything, again, it could be pickleball, or it could be fishing, or it could be interior design, it could be anything. It could be turned into $1 million course. They just need somebody to help them build out the framework, build out the backend, somebody that can take care of the technical side of things. And if you're, looking to make money online and you just don't know where to start, then this should be candy to your ears, essentially, because you should listen to this and think, damn, that's a huge opportunity. I can go out, as a newbie, as we say in gaming. I can go out as a noob and learn the basics of these things and then partner up with an expert and help them create and launch a course. And we can run that business together, and I can make a lot of money from that. Personally, I've been doing this as a side business for around 2 years now, and it works great. Some months it makes me over $100,000, other months it makes me $50,000 or even less than that, but it generates me good profit pretty consistently, okay? And it's a business that I don't have to put that many hours into, and I love working with the clients because every client is different. Every time we take on a new client, we have to help them create a course or an info product and build out a funnel on a completely new topic, right? So there's something to learn every time, and we build valuable and fun and inspirational relationships with these clients. So it doesn't feel like robot work like when I used to run my SMMA and I was just always running ads for e-commerce businesses, right? This is different, this is more interesting, and furthermore, we get a stake in their business because we help them create it, right? And so we might get, for example, 20 or 30% permanent profit share in the business or in the course that we help them create. But here's the caveat. When I started doing this business, we called it IPGA. When I started working with these clients around 2 years ago, the biggest obstacle we'd encounter was essentially going from scratch to launch, okay? Because going from scratch to launch could oftentimes take 8 to 12 weeks, okay? So 2 to 3 months. And that's far too long, right? You're essentially not making any money in that period. You might be getting a 5K, for example, setup fee up front, but then there's 2-3 months where you're not making any money because the real money starts to pour in once the course is launched and you start getting your monthly profit share, right? And so that was a huge issue. And a lot of the people that we taught how to run an IPGA started running into this issue as well. They'd sign on a client, get a nice upfront payment of $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, sometimes $10,000, but then nothing would happen for the next 3 months because the client just had to create this course, and that would always take longer than expected. And it became this sort of abstract process, right? And so at the beginning of this year, I decided to streamline that process. And that's when I created what we call the IPF, or the Info Product Framework, which we now give to all our members. And I'll just have my editor sort of throw up some sequences from the Course Creator Launchpad, which is part of the IPGA Masterclass, show essentially what I was doing. To make a long story short, was that the IPF, it takes you through every step of creating and launching a course from scratch. And it's a full 7-step sheet that you can sit down with your client in front of you, either on Zoom or in person, and you can complete it, the entire thing, in a couple of hours. And so that cuts down the process, which will usually take, just 3-4 weeks, maybe sometimes 5-6 weeks of brainstorming and aligning on how long should the course be, what should the niche be, what should it be called, what should the price be, what should the offer be, what should the value proposition be. All of these things that we had to figure out before the client could even start recording. It turns all of that into a streamlined process that we call the Info Product Framework, that you can sit down with a client and complete in literally a couple of hours. And so this means that now, instead of having to spend 8 to 12 weeks before we can launch, it cuts down the process to like 2 weeks. And so you can sign on a client and get everything done and at least pre-launched within 2 weeks. And this just speeds up the process so much and means that you can take on far more clients quicker, essentially. And so when I was doing that live in CCL, when I was completing the IPF live to sort of show how to use it, I pretended that I was like a Burgundy red wine expert and that I had to create a Burgundy wine course. And so by going through the entire IPF, I nailed the niche first, then we nailed the sub niche, then we built out the curriculum, and then we came up with a name for the course. It ended up being called Burgundy Navigator. Then we came up with the pricing. We came up with what we call the VPH, which is the value proposition headline, which is essentially what becomes the headline on the sales funnel. We do all of that stuff, and I show live how I would create it and how I would do it with a client in person. And so the IPF just streamlines things so much, and I think it's a great addition to what we give our members, essentially. But even if you're not a member, you can sort of sit down and try to create a similar streamlined process, right? Just pretend you had to create the Info Product Framework from scratch and outline what are the steps that go into creating a course with a client. What do we have to nail down? And so nowadays, when we sign a new client, the typical workflow goes something like this. Number one, we'll sign the client and we'll receive the upfront payment, which again, in our members' cases is usually around $5,000. We now take quite hefty upfront prices. So starting from around 15 to 20K, but reaching as high as $140,000 for the biggest client we've ever signed. Okay, but that's unusual. It'll usually be around 15 to 20, even 25K. So that's step 1 and 2, right? Sign the client, sign the contract, and get the payment. Then the next step will be that we sit down with the client, again, either on Zoom or in person, and we go through the entire IPF together, okay? And we do it in one sitting, one session. And by the end of that, again, we'll have the sub niche, okay? We'll have the value proposition, we'll have the curriculum, we'll have the offer, we'll have the pricing, we'll have the name, we'll have even the branding, we'll have everything that we need to essentially go ahead and pre-launch this course immediately to their, if they have an existing audience, we can pre-launch it to their existing audience. But if they don't have an existing audience, we also have the methods for how to at least get their first 10 people into it immediately. And so once we have that foundation, the IPF created, well, we'll get the client started on material production, right? Because it's their course, it's their knowledge at the end of the day. So they need to start, doing the keynotes or doing the talks that they're going to be presenting. And while they do this, we build out the backend, right? So we make sure that the course backend with all the lessons that we've outlined in the curriculum during the IPF creation process is ready. We have their community ready. We start building out their sales funnels, their sales funnel and the backend infrastructure for it. So email marketing, client onboarding, all of these things, we'll build out the backend for them. We do all of that in our software buildable. And so that's going to be ready for them by the time they finish recording their course. And once all of that is done, we can execute a successful launch for the client. It really makes the process so simple. Now, of course, I dumb it down a little bit. There are quite a lot of components that go into this, but it's not that difficult, right? And again, coming back to the beginning of this video, it's pretty cozy. You can do this from the comfort of your apartment. You can do this working with your client on Zoom. And the skills that you need to be able to execute this strategy is you can literally learn it in 1 week. You could do it like by going through a program like the IPGA Masterclass, or just by spending like a week just searching for as much information as you can find on YouTube. I do recommend that you have sort of a streamlined process like what we give in the IPGA Masterclass. But again, if you're on a budget, you can learn all of this information for free. It's possible. And then once the course is launched and the funnel is doing its thing and making money 24/7, even when we sleep, well, we just send out a monthly invoice to the client with our profit share percentage, right? So if we manage to scale a client's course to, let's say, 50K a month and our profit share is 20%, well, we'll be invoicing them 10%, right? If we scale it to 100K a month, well, our profit share will be 20K a month. So you can see that just with a few clients, like even just with 2 or 3 clients, if you scale their course, then you can make a lot of money from running an IPGA. And most of the work is upfront, right? So most of the work goes into, again, like just sitting down, filling out the IPF, getting the client started with the recording, and then building out the backend funnel. But once that's done, only the easy part is left, which is actually scaling it, okay? And that comes down to 2 components mainly, organic marketing and paid marketing. But nowadays, I'm sorry for that, but nowadays organic marketing is king, okay? So we essentially just advise our clients on what kind of YouTube content to create, what sort of videos should they be creating, and then we advise them on how to improve their content, okay? Because YouTube is by far the strongest way to pull in traffic for your info product nowadays, okay? And then whenever relevant, which is in most cases, we'll also run ads for the client and scale their course and their offer further with paid ads. But that's something we only really do once we've built some case studies for the client and once we know that their funnel and their value proposition and their offer is on point. Because if you start running ads before you've dialed in those things and before you have some good reviews and some client results that you can show in the funnel, then running paid ads is kind of like flushing money into the drain, okay? You need to do it once your funnel is pretty dialed in. Now, to conclude this, I want to say, I don't think that IPGA will make you $100 million, okay? It might not even make you $10 million. It certainly could if you went all in on it, but even $10 million is pretty far-fetched for an IPGA. But what it can do is make you 10, 20, 30, 40, even 50K on the high end per month, okay? That's what you can achieve with an IPGA within literally a couple weeks or a couple months of starting it. You start it, you get the fundamental knowledge, you sign on 1, 2, or 3 clients, you build out the course with them, and then you go all in on scaling that course. You can do all of this while you stay in the shadows, by the way. You don't have to be public, okay? It's the client's course. You're just the person in the shadows building this thing. And so again, it really only takes, like if your goal is 10K a month, it only takes like 1 client that you scale their info product to 50K a month and your profit share is 20%. Boom, you're at 10K per month. Now imagine you do that with 2, 3, 4, 5 clients. You're balling at that point. And again, this can all be done sitting in a cozy place with a fall background playing and some, what was it called again? Chestnut? No, not chestnut. Pumpkin spice latte, that's the one. But again, you're probably not going to become a billionaire from this. You're probably not going to make 100 million from it. But what it will do is serve as an excellent stepping stone for you starting your digital career, essentially. Okay. When it comes to what kind of online business model you should choose one that not only allows you to make good money, but also allows you to build an incredibly relevant skill set. And in this attention creator education economy that we're living in nowadays, there isn't really a more valuable skill set that you can start building today than the IPGA skill set, because it teaches you all the relevant skills: how to create info products, how to create sales funnels, how to manage backends, how to use all of the tools that go into running what are the most profitable businesses today. You'll learn the full spectrum of the toolbox, essentially, that, let's call it the 2026 millionaire toolbox. That's the skill set you have to develop in order to run this. And it's pretty realistic, okay? You just have to get started, essentially, and then go with the flow. And then you can use that stepping stone and that leverage and that money that you'll earn yourself running an IPGA, and maybe you'll build another business with it. Who knows? If you start an IPGA today, you might not be running it in 3, 4, or 5 years from now. You might be doing something else. Personally, I've spent, like, over the last year, I've taken a lot of my money and poured that into a software startup that still hasn't turned a profit. Like, we haven't made $1 from that software yet. We're still building it. It's pretty expensive. I couldn't have done that if I didn't have cash flow businesses such as my IPGA and my own courses. That's where you got to start. You got to start a high leverage cash flow business, and then after that you can do whatever you want. I've realized that one of my biggest passions in life is creating products. Right. The other one is education as a whole. I love education. I want to democratize my education. I want to enable people to create as much good education as possible. And so that's why I teach IPGA, because if you guys can go out and partner up with a bunch of experts and help them launch valuable courses, then I'm furthering my impact as well by enabling that. Right. But my other big passion in life is just creating products. I love creating products. And so that includes software. And so I'm loving the process of building this software that I'm building right now and pouring all of this money into it. But I could never allow myself to do that. Well, I wouldn't be enabled to do that if I didn't have cash flow businesses first. And so that's where you got to start. You got to build a cash flow business. And I think IPGA is probably your best, most profitable, and coziest bet at that. So yeah, that's essentially it for this fall theme video on the coziest way to make money in 2026. Now, if you want to learn more about how you can run an IPGA, I'll link a video down below in the description called My 80K a Month Side Business, which talks more about the details and essentially how I run my IPGA. You can watch that if you want. If not, have a good day.